So this is a offline recording. As many of you know, I messed up on the recording for the real time training and presentation. So I'm doing my best to try to recoup that and get some information out to parents that missed this presentation, missed this training. So I'm going to probably cut this down to half the time and hopefully add just as much value to those that missed it. So welcome and thanks for joining, or thanks for listening in. So quick little access points in terms of this training series. It definitely, we're on week number or month number 3, and there'll be more to come. So hopefully you're logged in, staying tuned to what's next. I come at this work not just as a individual with 2 children, but as not just as a teacher, but as an owner of a company that provides executive function coaching, academic coaching, parent coaching type work for students, young adults, helping to overcome medical challenges of ADHD, as well as develop life skills and academic skills, developing executive function skills to manage school and life. So pretty awesome team, real special group of people that are doing great work across the country. And some of you are in this audience are recipients of that. And I'm blessed and humbled to be part of such an amazing team and doing hopefully some really meaningful work out there with families. And so this is really an extension of that, offering these trainings for people that, for families that that want more information, right? They're super conscientious, working hard to get answers to help their children, and this training is a way of just doing that. So thanks for taking the time this evening and joining us, and being part of this journey with me and the team. So there's trainings you can access through our Teachables platform that we're using as a place to share out resources and content. So there's some good stuff in there, and this is just one piece of what will be put in there as a recording. As I said, I'm a parent, and I'm figuring this out along with the rest of you. I have a beautiful, wonderful eighth grader working through the complexity of middle school, and Allison and JD, who is in 2nd grade, are coming out of COVID pandemic and trying to find their voice, and us as parents doing the same, trying to be the best version of ourselves as we help our kids. So that's cool. So I'm always kind of switching my hats from the special ed teacher that I do during the day as a special ed teacher working in a school, as a co-teacher in history department, learning center, strategies courses that help build skills in the school, to what I do at home, to the work I do outside of that in this business. So we should be constantly challenging screen time. We should constantly be asking questions that relate to the engagement and the complexity of what screen time means to our children's development, our own development as well. And I think we have to be super self-reflective with our own journey of what screen time means to us as we role model, lead by example. So we need to be looking at that kind of first question, is the cost-benefit analysis always of our children's engagement with screen time. And it's a constant questioning process, and then also, what does screen time suggest as an obsession with online activity? What does that mean for my child? Are they spending too much? Is it turning into an obsession / addiction? And how do I help my child to help themselves? And how do I promote that conversation? And is screen time helping to replace you as a primary influencer in your child's life? That's a big deal. Social media can now reach itself into our homes, and the social world can be louder than us. And the values and ideas and beliefs that we try to instill in our children can get very muddled and gray and confusing if they're listening to outside voices more than us. And so it's really important that we keep that world really clear for them, that it's that we matter more, and try to keep that statement lasting as long as possible until they're developmentally ready to start to go beyond that relationship and that trust and that establishment. And then does this activity, in terms of like whatever it is, the screen time activity, does this activity move me towards my goals or away from my goals? And that's a really great question that helps us constantly help our children to evaluate their intentions. Where are you going? How do you get there? Right? And how's that activity you're doing right now? What support that growth? Right? And what is the purpose of that? And that's a constant question that we ask ourselves as well. We get lost in distracted and lost in screen time, right? We're a victim of it as well. And how does that question promote our ongoing attention to who we're being the best version of ourselves? And does this activity bring me joy, bring meaning and joy? And that's a great question that many more and more self-aware teenagers are asking themselves as they put down their phones more often, as they turn off certain apps that are driving their energy down and their attention up, and really trying to reclaim their lives. So questions, and I'm going to do a statistical deep dive for those parents that love this stuff. And I think statistics just gives us kind of maybe a quantifiable baseline on what's going on out there in the world. And when kids are getting, beyond the age of 8 to 10, 12, 14, you'll see an increase in screen time use of over 6 hours. And that's just not a screen as in a laptop. We're talking screen time as it relates to cell phone use. The average kid can spend up to 7 to 9 hours on a screen, on their cell phone each day, especially if they can bring their phone to school with them. It's a chronic issue. And obviously most parents don't see what goes on in the school day. But ask your child, ask them, or look at the data. It's not hard for them to look. iPhone, it's a quick one click, and they can see what their wellness account of how much time they're spending on their phone. And in some kids, it's 30 hours a week. That's about 5 days in a month. That's staggering. 5 days out of a month. It's almost a whole week, 1/4 of a month on screen time. And I don't think they're running a business on their cell phone, right? I don't think they're being highly productive. They're not necessarily moving their future forward as much of just being static in some distraction. It's can be a real problem for this generation that's worth the conversation. Other statistics that are just noteworthy. I'm a teacher. I would agree with this. 67%. I would almost feel it's higher. 89% of parents take responsibility for the child's cell phone use. I think so. We did give them one, right? And so therefore we're somewhat responsible for its use, or its or its other problems that relate to it. 41 teenagers feel overwhelmed by the quantity of notifications. Most do. You ask them, I always ask kids, what did you do this weekend? Right? And they may have spent 30 hours on their phone. They may have spent 8 hours playing video games each day. They'll never mention that. They'll never talk about, they'll be like, oh, nothing. Oh, not much. Right? It'll never be, I had an amazing weekend on my screen. I had an amazing weekend on my cell phone. Right? It just doesn't define, that doesn't necessarily quantify as being meaningful. So it's never really shared out as being something that defined their weekends, even though it did. This is, not always the case, but you do see, especially the younger kids, waiting by the bus stop maybe in the mornings, kids just sitting there on their phones, 52%. Most parents know this, but if you don't, if you're kind of new to the teenage world or this conversation, there's really 3 competing, very successfully competing for attention. TikTok making a significant run at being the more dominant. YouTube is not on here because it's not really a social platform, but it should be in terms of an engagement platform, really grabbing attention at a significant rate at this generation. And it's not captured here, but I would probably give it its own color and throw it up there pretty high up on the percentage scale. For those that are gaming is really interwoven in the fabric of society as well. Not necessarily a place of judgment, but a place of awareness, understanding, and constant communication with our children around what does gaming mean and how does it relate in my life, right? And how does it interact with the priorities of my life? And we'll talk about dopamine in a minute. But the statistic is interesting, right? Adults, I think at this point statistically, there's more adults gaming than children. So there are a lot of adults out there that are very involved with the gaming world, and streaks are something that is part of Snapchat, and I find this video pretty interesting.
Hands, give me whole hands if you have Snapchat. If you use Snapchat, give me your whole hands, please. Keep your hands high if you have some kind of streak going, any streaks going. Keep your hands high if you like streaks. Isn't that interesting? Isn't it wild that so many of us are doing something that we don't actually like doing. And by this point in the presentation, you can probably guess that the people at Snapchat are not waking up in the morning and saying, how can I create the most meaningful friendships and relationships between teenagers today? Streaks are a really powerful tool at getting us to come back and use the app every day. But something strange starts to happen, right? It starts to feel like, ooh, if I don't have streaks going with this person, are we really friends?
That's very interesting, how just comfortably numb our habits can become with social media and with our kind of our social interactions with our peers. I just found that fascinating. As a teacher, I plan to show that to my students and see what they think.
Hands, give me whole hands if you have.
Some just statistical recommendations that might be helpful to you as you think about baselines and how you start working with your children on where you put the line of expectations. But the 5 to 17-year-old, that's 5 to 17 years. That's just a staggering time period, actually. But 2 hours per day. I kind of want to break that up a little bit, but this has to do with screen time. But I also would say this has to do with that's hard to measure, the 2 hours per day. But I would say distracted time or dopamine rich kind of screen time. That might be gaming, so to speak, or certain types of social media, the scrolling of things, versus like obviously sitting down writing a paper. Is your child ready for a personal device? Well, that's the question we have to ask ourselves. It's like just as similar as is my child ready for college? Big questions, with never a black and white answer, right? But am I ready for a personal device? This is a form in a way that you can use with your child and have them go through. There's like 12 questions here, and I'll share out the link in this video. But you can go through and ask your child to answer these questions. You can talk about what each question relates to, and help your child learn that these are prerequisite skills that are needed in order to earn the privilege of managing a very complex, a super powerful tool like a personal phone, right? A smartphone. And it really brings kind of a real honest appreciation to the priorities of life and how the management of those priorities leads into greater responsibilities. It's great stuff. When should your child get a phone? Great question. I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer for you as it relates to your child, but I will say there's a really cool initiative that I hope more and more parents get on board with, and as a community, band together to support their child through middle school. Middle school is complicated enough. I don't think we should make it more complicated by giving them a cell phone, but that's my personal, / professional opinion. I see the cost of that as a teacher that teaches freshmen, and how very overwhelmingly difficult it is for so many dysregulated teenage boys and girls to keep their phones off their minds during the school day. So this is kind of a big deal. Talk to your kids about it. Come up with, as you think about, kind of the whys of that. Let me jump into the dopamine effect and then go into some other recommendations. But dopamine effect is real. It's a chemical reaction to what screens are doing to our attention, right? And how it's increasing the feel-good hormone within our bloodstream, driving an addictive-like tendency to want more, right? And many of our kids are given these devices without the self-regulatory systems in order to stop and transition from preferred to non-preferred, right? And the devices make it hard anyways because they're never-ending games. There's never-ending scrolling. Netflix goes from like one show to instantly 10 seconds later starting the next show, right? The timer goes off and our kids don't even hear it. So they definitely can't do this without us, right? Developing the self-regulatory processes at a young age is almost impossible. The gaming industry, the social media industry, the tech industries are better than our kids are, right? They have us beat. Even adults have us beat at this game. So they've don't capitalized on the dopamine effect and how to keep us wanting more. So some parents want their kids just to go figure it out, sink or swim. Sure, yeah, I think some can. And they can learn from their mistakes, and then they can problem solve and develop interventions and develop strategies and develop solutions to the problems related to the stealing of their attention. Others can't, and we see the chronic failure of their attempts or lack of attempts or inabilities, and therefore we need to step in, right? You can think about 4 negative effects of too much dopamine, and then, this isn't just about cell phone use, right? Dopamine in terms of addictive-like patterns, in terms of drug use, anything, right? We can get a high off of jumping off of a bridge into the water, right? That's another example of that kind of dopamine hit. But there's a consequence to this, right? You have addictive-like tendencies, the dopamine crash, which your dopamine goes below baseline, leading to a lethargy, leading to sometimes a lack of motivation and feeling like anything else in life, kind of the mundane existence of life is not really motivating. Right? It kind of lacks this kind of feeling of purpose because it isn't the same as that other world. Right, this other dopamine-rich environment, and kids with ADHD, this is even harder because the dopamine is part of the issue with the attention, right, and the focus, and so the gaming kind of world, that increase in dopamine, it feels even more significant, right? It feels more visceral in terms of its impact, and therefore it almost has more of an addictive-like presence for them. And therefore even harder than a typical developing child to break free of and not be thinking about. So requiring another level of intervention as a parent. What screen time boundaries are in place to promote? What are you doing? What are we doing? Can we talk about slow tech living? Can that become a mission in our family? Can we talk about what it feels like as a family to have an unplugged, I wouldn't say unplugged, I like this slow tech mindset perspective that I don't have to define my existence, my family time, my home time, my social time based on technology. I can cultivate a slow tech living. And when I think about the times of my life, right, and break life into categories of time, I have downtime, bedtime, screen time, dinner time, and how do I organize my relationship with the priorities of life related to who I'm trying to be and my goals and my intentions, my desires, my responsibilities, and how does that drive my attention and my time? Realizing that screen time is the most dopamine rich, exciting part of that day if I don't, and therefore requiring real awareness and a conversation around what that is doing to our brains and why it sometimes feels more important than anything else, right? And that has to do with that chemical dopamine and how it's driving our attention and our emotions and our attraction to it. Parenting strategies, let's jump into some. Most important is connect. Always be connecting with your kids. Always be relating to this challenge in a real, honest, authentic way. Talk about your journey yourself and what that means. The goal for our kids is to help them develop a well-rounded and coexistence with technology, right? And not feel like a victim of it and not feel like they're losing the battle. And that can be easier for some than others, right? And think about someone that has social anxiety and how that's really hard for them to coexist in the social world. So they might spend more time online because there is a social element, but it's a social element that may not have the same long-term benefits, right? But it still checks a box in terms of interactions because they're able to play a video game and chat with people. However, does that end up building skills to be able to go out and do that in the real world and make meaningful physical relationships? Not always the case, no. So cell phone contracts, what does that mean? There's a few options that I would love to be able to show you. So I'm going to switch screens for a second to see if I can do this. And actually, yeah, I'm going to show you a folder. In this folder, there are a few different contracts to pick from. One is you can edit. It's literally you can type right in there. It's probably the best one. That's Josh Shipp's version of it. Look at that. This is a folder. There's a few other versions. And understood.com is a great resource, and there's two different types of contracts in there. One is for the older teenager, and one is for the young preteen. So if you've already given a cell phone, you kind of have to work backwards a little bit. You have to kind of hit the reset button, right? Kind of lick your wounds and say, I kind of screwed up as a parent. Contracts can be really, really helpful. So think about this, talk to your children, make them part of the process. Take the contracts, print them off, put them in front of your kids, and talk about them being a draft that we're going to talk about, edit, and make sure that it represents the voice of both child, especially for older teens, especially if you restart and revisit or start new, having made some wonderful parenting mistakes, right? Now that we know what we know. However, let's talk about what we may also know if we have older teens, some of the impacts of screen time, right? I'm not going to share all of the impacts. I think it'd be a waste of time to do that. I will share something that's called autobiographical planning. And when we give our children a cell phone, especially if it's throughout the day where they have access to it, it can limit a cognitive process that has to do with maybe metacognition too, is how we think about ourselves, how we think about our own thinking, how we daydream and ponder our future, and as it relates to who we're trying to be. I made a video about this a while ago that I'd love for you to listen to. And hi, Dr. Murphy here. So I'm driving to work this morning, and I drive by a bus stop, and there's a few students there, middle school boys, and typical you see with many students is they're out next to each other waiting for the bus with their phones out in front. I think it looked like one was maybe watching something and the other student was maybe scrolling. So we had a social media and maybe a kind of a Netflix moment here. And I thought, again, I couldn't leave my mind. I started wondering, what's the cost? Maybe there isn't one, but I'll take a negative perspective and see what I uncover. And I think one of my conclusions of that is throughout the day, I came up with this term autobiographical planning in my research. And autobiographical planning is one's ability to, in other words, look at yourself in relation to the future, right? And when you think of a morning and you think of like the demands and expectations, the stress put on a student as they walk into the burden of a day, I suspect that a generation of children have lost that ability to autobiographically plan out their future. And that has a lot to do with evaluating what my future looks like, what it feels like, what expectations are there before me in the future, and taking kind of cost-benefit analysis on the future decisions of life and the future problems of life, and just to sit and ponder and organize and wander and maybe daydream around the future of things. And I suspect that we are dealing with somewhat of a consequence of our children, or a generation of children, have lost that gift and that skill, because we have replaced it. Our society has replaced that gap of time, that moments of boredom, with technology or distractions that leave them never really getting that opportunity. And I suspect there'll be a chance for us to unravel the true cost of that missed opportunity. I think, and we as parents and we as professionals are maybe trying our best to intervene, maybe years too late. So it gets me kind of thinking with the community and with parents, is the best thing that we can do with our children is not send them off to school with their cell phones. And if that's one little decision we make as a parent community, does that give us or give our children an opportunity to think about their future, to autobiographically plan for the potential, for the challenges that lie ahead, to organize game plans, plan A, plan B, solutions to future problems? Or does it not? Just some food for thought as there are some conversations in the real training that kind of factored in the topic around anxiety. And if I'm not facing the burden of a day, each day, every day, when I'm not doing that, is there a compound effect of the days that go by when I'm not really facing the anxieties of those days? So therefore they pile up, and 5 days go by with various unsolved problems, and really without the opportunity to filter through the noise of life in a real quiet, contemplative way. Is that leading towards a greater sense of chronic stress and anxiety and overwhelm? Again, something worth debating.
Hi, Dr.
But the other costs that are worth talking about is task switching. Phrase that gets used is multitasking, but cognitively, you technically can't multitask. The brain can't do that. Our children think they can. We actually, as adults, even think we can, but you really can't. Your brain can't do multiple things at once cognitively with a high level of effectiveness. So let's call it task switching, where I move from one task to the other, and I'm simultaneously changing my attention from one to the other. And think about the demands of reading requirements, note-taking requirements, and how hard that is in and of itself as a task, and how much harder that task becomes when I add the distracted, dopamine-rich world of social media or gaming or Netflix as part of my constant bombardment and task switching behavior. Obviously, that creates anxiety. I'm just getting anxious talking about it. but that inefficiency has a cost. We talk about a lot of our clients and a lot of our parents. I talk about working smarter, not harder. And we see the chronic symptoms of working so hard and not having developed the skills to be efficient and effective with your attention. And one of those is managing the task switching, right? And managing the technology and where I put it, where I don't. The other cost from even an adult perspective is the mindfulness that we miss out on, living in the present moment. And we really have to be conscientious as parents as we lead by example, and really creating low-tech environments in the house, no-tech environments in the house where people are just present, mindful, and listening and making eye contact and engaging in a real humanistic way, right? And not just listening to someone while their cell phone is grabbing their eyes, but their ears are somewhere else. That can be very confusing to a preteen that's watching your behavior and then getting accused of doing the same thing, right? So heavy multitasking has its impact on brain functionality. These are really for younger kids, but as the developing brain is developing to the age of 26 for young men, it is a big deal when we think about the chronic symptoms of multitasking in their developing years. I'll take a quick moment with ADHD. This presentation isn't about ADHD, but it is about attention. And for those with ADHD, it is harder to put attention towards non-preferred activities. In general, that's very difficult. Now imagine how much more difficult it is when you add gaming into it, when you add social media into it. So you have high preferred, high interest, high dopamine rich activities that are stimulating and rewarding and self perpetuating. And then you create a bigger divide emotionally and behaviorally and cognitively and medically, this bigger divide between the transition from those preferred tasks to those non-preferred tasks. The cost of that is emotional dysregulation, right? Decreases in motivation, lethargy, a feeling of why does this matter? And it's because everything is compared. The general mundane of life, like I keep saying, is compared to these these real meaningful, I should say, dopamine rich experiences, and how confusing that gap is between the two, right? And how do you foster a meaningful life? By recalibrating in a way, right? What brings meaning? What brings that feeling of dopamine in the general existence of a day that has nothing to do with this online world. One cool piece of evidence that's worth noting is children, kids, parents, we may have kind of a general kind of feeling of anxiety as it relates to life, and we've developed our own coping strategies to manage it. However, when you think about the online world, you think about social media, you think about screen time, there is research to say that if you have a hard time with attention anyways, or anxiety, screen time can exacerbate it, can make it more pronounced. So that's important to kind of keep in mind. For us as parents, it is for any child, not just ADHD, but I think it's more important with children that may have this medical condition, is developing an emotional language, emotional kind of willpower, grit, perseverance. I use a phrase, goal-directed perseverance in this dialogue, because sometimes to achieve goals with ADHD, I have to be overwhelmingly deliberate, overwhelmingly conscientious, overwhelmingly strong and resourceful, and using willpower to overcome and to push through and to transition from preferred to non-preferred activities, right? From gaming to getting homework done, to the grind of getting homework done, to the grind of showing up to school the next day, can be an ongoing battle, and we must celebrate that process and the wins along the way, right? As we teach our kids how to feel empowered to overcome their challenges and achieve their goals. Right. So strategies to improve self-awareness and productivity. I'd say the biggest parent strategy is banding together. Work together as a community to regulate screen time, right? Play dates. Can we all agree just to leave the phones at home, or put them in a basket, or give your kids play dates? Kids come in, they don't go downstairs and get on Xbox together, right? They don't have to. Go outside, go get dirty, go play in the mud, go play in the snow, go play in the rain. And then make it part of, sure, there's a window of time where that can be helpful, but really developing a relationship within ourselves. If a child comes in with their cell phone into a play date, and they're the only one with that cell phone, and it starts to create this kind of awkward relationship, the cell phone goes away. Parent takes it and puts it in a bin, and you can get it at the end of the play date, right? Sleepovers, same thing. Unplugged, screenless sleepovers. Working together as a family, as a community, builds a collective language, a collective understanding, a collective appreciation. And screens out of the bedroom being one that's a big soapbox of mine in terms of really giving our children the feeling that their bedroom is a place to go to bed. Can't always be a place to do homework anymore because of the screens. So you create community environments, common area environments, library-like environments within the house. This has to do with family rules as you think about what are our rules of engagement, what are the expectations within ourselves as the adults in the room, but also with our children, with our family around those expectations. How do we create a low-tech environment within the home on during the weeknights where being a student is most important? Right? How about no screens in the car? That can be super cool. We have 3 friends getting the back seat. Every one of them pulls up lifts up their cell phone and starts playing something. Not one of them is talking to each other about whatever they just came from, jumping in the car after a soccer practice or whatever. So how do we create a screen time car ride? Well, you open up the console and everyone throws their phones in the console, and you close it, and they get their cell phones when they reach their destination. It's a win-win. So feel empowered as parents to be able to do that, and constantly, again, always being vigilant around the intentionality of screen times as our children are growing and maturing, right? These are just kind of some media tips from the experts out there that just are worth acknowledging and sharing and building into your contract, family plan, however you want to do that. Best kind of general framework for that is you meet as a family. So everybody gets together, mom and dad, the kids, whatever, meet together as a family. You talk about the general expectations around cell phone, screen time use in this family. Great. Have that conversation, put stuff in writing if you need to. Talk about your expectations as the adults in the room, children's expectations, and then you maybe then start pulling your children one at a time, individual contracts. Why? Because every child is different. Every child has strengths and weaknesses. Every child, it's your job to exploit their strengths, right, and teach them how to manage their weaknesses and to be the best version of themselves. But every child's different, so you can have individual contracts for each one of them if you need to. Strategies that improve learning in the schools. Cool. Let's talk about being a student. That's their job, right? Their main job is to be a student, right? So connect with your children all the time about how hard it is to balance and juggle screen time and study time to be effective, and how difficult that must be on an ongoing basis. Right? Talk to them about what's working, not working. What are the challenges? What are the unsolved problems? And how can you help? Right? Try this challenge with them. Do 15 minutes with their cell phone at their ready, and then 15 minutes without it, and see how if they notice their attention, how their attention changes with having it versus not having it in sight, in proximity. It can be significant. It can be significant, even from the notifications that might pop up on their phone, or they hear it vibrate, whatever it is. Talk about it. Have a discussion. Other strategies can help out. Sometimes having effective strategies becomes the tools that we use to control our attention, right? So have a game plan. What is my game plan? And setting a timer, making a list, checking off the assignments, taking meaningful breaks, not cell phone breaks, but meaningful breaks, right? Taking a movement break, fresh air, social interact, go downstairs, get a snack, say hi to your brother, sister, say hi to mom, like whatever it is, make it meaningful, and then transition back to the next activity, right? No screens in the bedroom is really a mindset around bedroom is a place to go to bed. And used to be in our world, like we didn't need these conversations. We didn't have these devices. Right? When you're in your room, you're in your room. Like, what did you do? Right? You put a tape deck in your tape deck recorder, and you recorded a song off the radio. I don't know what you did. That's what I did. Or you I live with my brother was in my room with me, so I don't know. You got in a fight with your brother, and but you could study in there without distractions, right? There's nothing to do. It's not the same anymore. So you can't treat the bedroom as being the same. It's not fundamentally the same. So where do you go to get shit done? Create that environment in the home and teach your children as a community. The younger you start, the better. How it's a building block for all the years ahead, where you're going to have to grind and really learn how to study. Homework skills build study skills. If you don't have the homework skills, you don't have the study skills. It goes back to having those routines in place to get homework done. Right. I've talked a little bit about this, practicing grit, right? Being able to teach the willpower to overcome, teach the perseverance, teach that this is hard, this is not easy. You want a cell phone? Great, right? Prove that you can manage it by managing the attention and what you put it to. Okay. Procrastination being a classic symptom of losing battle, right? I'm losing that battle, and procrastination is the result of it, right? It's and so these are just great, language parent. Away for the day as a mindset that really talking about what schools can start to do, especially middle school, and how our attention and learning, it's a losing battle. Many kids are struggling with learning because they're struggling with their attention to the devices around them. These are two great articles, but you can go to Wait Until 8 to read them. Actually, one of them is on that site, but a great article. It's a great mission statement. It's a great initiative for parents and their communities to embrace, right, and work out. If you have a fourth grader, start talking to your parents. If you have a fifth grader, start talking to your parents. If you have a second grader, start talking to your parents. And starting to make that decision collectively. Do it together. It's a lot easier for them if they're not isolated and it's just one parent doing it to one kid and there's just a higher level of resentment. But if it's a group of kids, it feels less like they're isolated, right? Because they're not. Misery likes company, especially when you're not given a phone and your buddy's not given a phone and his buddy's not given a phone. And there's just 6 buddies that aren't given a phone. It's like, oh, I hate my parents. Yeah, I hate my parents too. I hate my parents. Yeah, well, now it's not just about you. It's about the whole team of parents, right? Screen time addiction. These are kind of online quizzes. You could have your kids take them. You can take them yourself. See what your score is. But really, it's about building awareness. And there are resources out there. But it starts with awareness, right? You can't really get help until you can admit that I need help, right? It's any addiction treatment kind of model, but it's a big deal. It's real. there are many reasons why my child could be addicted. Social anxiety kind of drives me towards technology because it's a great place to escape. It's a great place to interact safely, but it's also a great place to avoid the feelings, right? And avoiding those feelings can sometimes lead to bigger feelings because I've been hiding from them. Instant gratification, of course, the dopamine fix is the instant gratification. Loss of interest in my activities. I start finding myself not wanting to interact. My mood starts changing, and personality starts changing. I start to hide from those around me, even the things I used to like to do. There's 4 types of treatment: outpatient, residential, therapeutic, and wilderness programs. I love wilderness programs. I think for some children that are really stuck, especially young adults, teenagers that are really stuck in these addictive patterns, addictive habits, addictive behaviors, they do need a reset, right? They need kind of a catalyst to upset the current patterns, right? And sometimes these type of treatment models can be the catalyst, can be the reset, can be the regrouping, reframing, and revisiting of who I am without the bombardment, the noise, the dopamine, and quiets my life back down to its baseline. And I can start to really listen to myself again and start to really cultivate an internal voice that I can trust and believe in again and rebuild. In that journey of self-awareness, there's documentaries that are really worth sharing. These are trailers. I don't really need to show them now, but great documentaries on social media, worth looking into. The other one is Screenagers. This is like, there's 2 sections. There's a part 1 and part 2. This is Screenagers, the next chapter, which the first one was just as great. So worth showing, worth watching yourself with you and your husband or family community. The access to them is a little more complicated because you have to schedule screenings, but maybe your school will do it. Maybe your CPAC will do it. Maybe your parent community will do it and sponsor it with your 3rd graders or 4th grade groups. Make it something meaningful that way. Gaming is a big deal. You should know what your kids what apps they have on their phone, what gaming apps, social media apps, video apps, if they have YouTube, if they have Netflix, if they have Amazon Prime, if they have Amazon Video, if they have YouTube Video, whatever movie streaming platforms they have on their phone, you should know. Gaming platforms, you should know. Social media platforms, you should know, and so that you just are part of their world, and that's really a big deal. It can be a scary place if you really lift open the hood and admit that it is, right? It's every dark alley that we never want our kids walking down, yet they can go down any of those alleys from their cell phone. Yeah. So thanks for taking part. I just done a quick just a supplemental rerun of this training, and I think it went I was pretty fast, but didn't cover all the great questions that came out during the real thing. So, which I feel were awesome. We have a really high level of engagement and participation. So I appreciate that, and I look forward to seeing you all maybe face to face at the next training. Questions and answers, you know how to reach me. I'm here to help. Take care.